Join Sinclair Fine Foods in our exciting new chapter. The crystal glasses clinked, surrounding the private dining room at Ellsworth, Boston's most exclusive restaurant. I grinned as Edward Kingston, the main investor at Meridian Capital, raised his glass with genuine enthusiasm. After months of negotiations, I had finally secured an $8 million investment to take my family's specialty food business national. The champagne was flowing, the investors were grinning, and my folks appeared happier than I had seen them in years. My name is Madison Sinclair. 8 years ago, I walked away from a lucrative finance job to save my parents' struggling gourmet shop. Everyone thought I was crazy, leaving my six-figure compensation for a family business that was just 3 months from bankruptcy. Yet, I saw promise where others saw only risk. I remember when your parents' shop was just that little. Place in Cambridge, said Vivian, my former business school professor, the one who had introduced me to the investors. And now look at this. National distribution, an online subscription model, and major manufacturing partnerships. Astonishing transformation, Madison. I felt a deep sense of pride as the investors nodded appreciatively. The journey hadn't been easy. I had restructured operations, rebranded our product line, secured strategic partnerships, and built an e-commerce platform from scratch. Sinclair Fine Foods had risen from a beloved local shop to a thriving national brand, shipping our unique jams and artisanal condiments to 48 states. None of this would have happened without Madison's vision, my father said, raising his glass. When Helen and I started this business 25 years ago, we never imagined it could become what it is today, my mother added with a smile, but then something flickered across her face, a hesitancy I recognized all too well. As the investors discussed expansion plans, something I had meticulously mapped out, my mother's hand crept into mine under the table. Madison, dear, she whispered, leaning close enough that her perfume wrapped around me. This is all very exciting. But remember, when William returns from his program next month, he'll make a better CEO for the family business. You've done a great job laying the groundwork, but he has the right education for something of this scale. William, the golden child. He had been traveling through Europe for the past year after receiving his MBA, barely checking in on the family business I had been rebuilding with my blood, sweat, and tears. I kept my smile firmly in place, squeezing my mother's hand in return, but inside, ice was forming in my stomach. 8 years of 18-hour days, skipping vacations, postponing my personal life, and she still saw me as nothing more than the temporary caretaker of William's birthright. Everything okay? Kingston asked, sensing the tension. Absolutely, I answered, raising my glass, but behind my smile, the wheels were already turning. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. After I outlined how our revenues had grown, I showed them consumer surveys. The traits most connected with our brand, innovation, sustainability, and community connection, were all initiatives I had spearheaded, not legacy parts from my parents' original company. What about the manufacturing relationships? Asked Thomas. Wouldn't you be beginning from zero? I shook my head. Our 3 primary manufacturing partners have contracts with renewal provisions coming up next quarter. I've kept those relationships personally for years. They know who actually runs this business. As the meeting went on, I drew out a detailed business plan for a new corporation, one that would leverage virtually everything I'd built at Sinclair Fine Foods, but without the family complications. This is excellent work for just one weekend, Kingston commented. However, I'm guessing you've been thinking about this for much longer. I nodded. It's been my contingency plan for about 3 years. I've watched how my parents regard William versus how they treat me. I knew this day might come. After 2 hours of discussion, Kingston leaned back in his chair. We invested in you, Madison, not just the corporation. The Sinclair brand has value, certainly, but you're the visionary who transformed it. He exchanged glances with his team. We need to do adequate due diligence on this new direction, but I'm inclined to divert our investment as you've proposed, with some tweaks to protect all parties. Relief washed over me. Thank you. I was prepared to walk away with nothing. If necessary. That wouldn't serve anyone's interests, Kingston replied. Least of all ours. However, I have one condition. You need to have an honest chat with your parents before we finalize anything. Give them a chance to recognize what they're about to lose. I wanted to reject the idea, to spare myself the inevitable anguish of that confrontation. But I knew he was right. I'll speak with them today. After the investors departed, I met with my core team, the people who had helped create the company alongside me. I hadn't told them about my contingency plan before, worried they would see it as disloyalty to the family business. I often wondered if you had an exit strategy, Daphne said after I explained the situation. The way your folks talk about William, it was only a matter of time. Jason nodded. We've worked with you for years, Madison. Not with the Sinclair name. Are you saying you'd come with me? I asked, startled by their immediate support. In a heartbeat, Tamara replied. We've discussed it, actually, Jason admitted. We figured this day might come, especially with William finishing his MBA. The knowledge that my team had anticipated this possibility and had already decided to follow me gave me the final dose of confidence I needed. They weren't just employees, they were allies. They recognized my value, even when my family didn't that evening. I drove to my parents' house with an odd sensation of peace. For years, I'd been battling for acknowledgement, striving to prove my worth through dedication and results. But today, I understood. No amount of achievement would ever change how people perceived me. William would always be their preferred successor, regardless of his lack of contribution, regardless of my track record. As I pulled into their driveway, my phone rang. It was William, calling from the airport. Hi, Maddie, he said pleasantly. Just landed. Mom mentioned something about a significant investment. Sounds like the timing of my return couldn't be better. I grinned to myself. The timing is perfect, I agreed. I'll see you tomorrow at the office. Tomorrow. Monday, when everything would change. The Sunday evening conversation with my parents went just as I had expected. My mother was shocked that I would even consider quitting the family legacy. My father, always the peacemaker, tried to suggest a compromise. Maybe you and William can co-lead the company? I've been running this business alone for 8 years, I reminded them. Why would I need a co-leader today, just as we're about to expand? William brings fresh perspectives, my mother insisted. He's always had the strongest business intellect in the family. Based on what? I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. The consulting job he quit after 2 years? The MBA that I paid for while reinvesting my salary to save our company? My father sighed. Madison, please understand. This was always the plan. William is the firstborn. I'm 37 years old, I interrupted. I've increased company revenue by 3,000%. I secured an $8 million investment based on my vision and execution. But none of that matters, because William was born first. Because he's your son and not your daughter. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They had no defense, except tradition and preference. The investors are backing me, not the family name, I stated finally. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, recognize reality, or lose everything I've built. I left them in stunned silence. A family portrait hung above the fireplace. William, front and center. Me, just a little off to the side. It had always been that way. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Monday morning arrived. At 7:30, I walked into the office early, preparing for what was coming. To my surprise, Daphne, Jason, Tamara, and a dozen other key employees were already there. What are you all doing here so early? I asked. Daphne smiled. We wanted you to know. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens today, we're with you. The gesture nearly broke my composure, but I managed a grateful nod before heading to my office. At 8:30 sharp, my parents arrived. At 8:42, William strolled in, wearing an expensive suit, exuding the casual confidence of someone who has never had to fight for recognition. At 9 a.m. exactly, Kingston arrived with his investment team. The office fell silent. "Mrs. Sinclair," Kingston said politely, "we're here to speak with Madison." The moment of reckoning had arrived.